the meeting to order at 1:30. And in terms of old minutes, we have two sets to look at and approve. The first one was from the 7:15 meeting. Everybody get a chance to look at those?
Yes.
Any problems, questions, issues? Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
There's a second. I'll second it. All in favor of the minutes as they're written? Aye.
Right.
I think I have to abstain. I wasn't attending.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And then the next set of minutes is from our last meeting, which was on 8/24. That was the public hearing. Did you guys get a chance to take a peek at those? All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve them.
I'll second him.
Ryan, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And I also abstain.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So we got through some of that. I did email the group a copy of the agenda that I kind of put forth for today. And I'd like to take things a little bit out of order because I think that, and as I'm speaking for myself here, and I don't want to speak for the group, I think the majority of the things, for instance, that Rich had brought up and that I had gotten from a member of the public relative to kennel inspections, and then also some of the suggestions from Glenn Sexton from the public hearing, they're very easy and straightforward. I'd just like to get those out of the way because I think that the ones that John and Bob had submitted are going to take much longer, just based on the volume of them. So the first thing I'd like to talk about was Rich Domaraki's question from the last public hearing about who determines that the recall petition is complete. And Rich had suggested that we give that authority to the town attorney. Rich, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, I do. I felt it wasn't really appropriate to have someone from the town, an elected official, approving or disapproving of a recall for another elected official. So I thought it should be someone who's a little bit removed from the town, in who better than the town attorney could just determine whether it's okay to proceed with the recall.
Yeah, along those lines, I thought it was a good idea, and I initially I was thinking about it from the perspective of when you first asked the question. My first thought was, well, the petition process is very simple. You have to have your signatures, and you have to have the statement of grounds. But then the more I thought about it, along the lines of what you just said, who's going to determine that? What elected official is going to determine that? And what if that elected official happens to be the person that the recall is for? That's a problem, right? So I was trying to figure out who would be the appropriate person if it wasn't the town attorney to do that. And I don't know that it exists, because let's just, for the sake of discussion, say, well, it can't be an elected official because they might be the person that's supposed to be recalled. So then maybe it's an appointed person. But that's problematic, because what if, let's just say you use the chief of police is the one who certifies it. Well, what if it's a select board member, or and the chief of police obviously works for the select board? There's some real kind of convoluted issues there. So I think your suggestion.
I really couldn't think of anyone else to pick.
Neither could I. I agree with you 100%. Sorry, I forgot to throw my phone off here. So the more I thought about it, I mean, I'm open to suggestions, but the town attorney is probably the one who's least, connected to anything. Now, what I don't know is the town attorney going to say that's problematic for this reason, that reason, or the other reason? That's not what we do, type of thing. I don't know the answer to that. Any discussion from the group?
I don't know the answer.
It seems to me that the town attorney is going to have to be involved, particularly the first time this happens, no matter what. So that may in fact mean that there's a possibility of a conflict there, because he's going to have to be involved, or he or she is going to have to be involved I think, with the whole process of a recall. I can't imagine taking place without the town attorney present.
Oh, sorry, I just did something here. I'm not sure what I did. Give me a second. There we go. No, I think it's a good question. I think that I like the idea of if it's possible and the town attorney is willing to accept it. I guess here's the problem. Can our bylaws dictate that an outside agency have responsibility for something? What if the town attorney of that time says, you know what, we're not doing that? Then what do we do?
Get another attorney?
Yeah, but we're paying the town attorney to provide legal services to the town.
No, I know, but we're also putting,
Who
What's that?
determines what legal services the town attorney has to provide the town, other than the town? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but why wouldn't the town attorney say whether the bylaw is being complied with? He does it in other situations.
you know, maybe we can simplify this a bit. Maybe we just, rather than say who determines it, maybe we just specifically state it is completed, or it is it's certified when A, B, and C are done. So if you've got your signatures and you've got your you fill out the statement of grounds or whatever it is that we decide, it is complete. There's no question about it. If you've done that, it's complete. And there's no determination whatsoever.
The
Oh, I
only
see.
issue I have that with Al, is that if you look at the reasons when a recall can be initiated, it says, I forget how it's worded, but it says something to the effect, it lists 3 or 4 reasons, but it says there are other reasons are acceptable to that effect.
Yeah.
So what if I just say, I want to recall Glenn Sexton because I don't like what he did on a certain project? So say the water pipe system. I mean, that probably wouldn't fly, would it?
It would have to fit one of the criteria. And keep in mind, the statement of grounds
Yeah,
isn't a statement of fact. So it's not like a standard of probable cause where I have to think of it from a criminal justice standpoint. That is just the reason. That's the alleged, the statement of grounds, for lack of a better way to describe it, is the alleged crime. It's no proof of the crime. It's the alleged crime itself. So if you let's just say Al Wishart's the elected person, because I feel a little guilty talking about elected people and using them as the example for a recall. So use me. Say I'm an elected official, and you want to get rid of me. You don't necessarily have to prove anything. You just have to state it. So you and I forget the number of people have to sign a petition saying we want to get rid of Al Wishart, and the statement of grounds it fits in the category A, B, C, or D for this reason, and this is what it is. You don't have to prove that. The only people you have to prove that to are the voters, and get them to vote that way. It's not a matter of a criteria of are you hitting the standard. It's, here's the situation. It's if you have a problem with something I did or didn't do, and it fits that criteria, and you can get X amount of the other people to sign that petition with you, then it goes forward.
let me ask you this, Al. I'll give you a live situation.
Sure.
On Facebook, a Granby resident asked if the town had a recall bylaw because they wanted to, I think he started a petition to recall a Board of Health member because they won't let the high school kids participate in sports. Now, would that be okay to proceed?
I would say that first of all, he would have to go through the process.
Right, right.
Getting all those numbers, which is not going to be an easy thing. We set this up as you were part of it to
Right.
eliminate frivolous political things from happening with the recall, and getting someone to the point where they're actually going to be recalled for something frivolous is going to be difficult to do when you look at the numbers needed to recall somebody. They're pretty significant, you know? And so that's, we actually had a lot of conversation about this in terms of, you know, how do we prevent that? And how do we prevent what's in Rich's mind? You know, we can't say, okay, Rich has a good reason to ask for this recall, or he just thinks Al's a jerk. You know, one of those two things, you know, how do we know what's in your mind? It's probably a little bit of both, right, Rich? But that's
No
okay.
comment.
As long as you can convince X amount of your friends that those two things exist, then it can go forward. But even with that, you still have an uphill battle getting, you know, I forget the number of the last registered voters to vote that way. That's significant.
Actually, I agree. I agree with you. I would rather have the petitioner try to get the number of signatures and then leave out the attorney completely. But I think you would have to remove where it says an approved petition, you know, because no one is really approving it.
It's a good point.
Do it
Yeah,
the way you
and I-
said.
And I was going to suggest that one of two things. We can certainly look at the issue from the town attorney standpoint. I think that might be convoluting the issue a little bit. I do
Right.
think we could probably specify more clearly what has to happen, you know, what certifies it. So nobody's certifying it, just saying this is the criteria. Once this specific criteria is completed, then it goes forward to the petition process.
Right, I would agree with you on that, yes.
Al?
Brian, Virginia, Steve?
Yeah, I was gonna say, instead of, you know, as Rich says, take out
Take
the
out
word approved, just put in the
Right.
word certified.
Okay,
What?
I've got right here on my desk 200 signatures, however many is needed, to remove X from the Board of Selectmen. Let's start.
I'm not in office, John, I'm out.
Doesn't somebody has to at least see whether the signatures are correct and approve that?
And I think, yes, and I think the reality of it is just like a
You running for office to get the,
envision it much like the process of when you want to get, when you're going for an elected office.
Yeah.
Virginia Snowpack wants to be a select board member. She's got to get X amount of people to sign her for that office. The town clerk, if I'm not mistaken, has to certify those at the signatures. So Al Wishart, yep, he lives in Lily Lane, and Rich Tamiraki, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And I believe they do that for all the elected officials. Am I right, Steve?
Board of registrars.
Right, so I would expect it to be along the same lines. If all those signatures are valid and none are, you know, associated to Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, we're good. And then if they have a statement of grounds with that, then I see that as being certified, to John's point.
Yeah, this
Add a
is-
few comments here,
Sure.
Al? All right, first, going back to the original statement about perhaps having town council. Town council would not be a good choice because it puts the town council in a position of enforcing our bylaws. And that's not what the purpose of the town council is for. Certainly that the recall petition falls squarely upon the town clerk, because under the statute, basically the town clerk and the board of registrars are the complete authority in terms of setting up votes or elections or things of that nature. So I think that you have to keep it as the town clerk. And if the town clerk happens to be the elected official who is being recalled, then the board of selectmen can appoint an alternate town clerk to handle that position. And I think that would be the better way to do it. That way the board of selectmen appoint an alternate town clerk who does that particular job, because obviously you wouldn't want the town clerk who is being or trying to be recalled in that position. But again, getting back to town attorney, that's not a good idea, because, all right, so if the town attorney screws up, now we have to get another town attorney, another council to defend the town attorney for actions or that he did. That doesn't work.
That's a good point, Steve, about the town attorney. And I guess one of the questions I have is, do you know for a fact that the select board has the authority to appoint someone
Yes,
to
we do.
a position?
So
Yeah, I don't
for
think
example, if any elected official became incapacitated, for example, and not able to do their job, then the Board of Selectmen can appoint an alternate treasurer, collector, town clerk, or any other elected official.
So you have to be careful, Steve, because what you're saying, at this point, if we wanted to recall a town clerk, she's not incapacitated, there's nothing wrong with her, we just want to recall her. So we'd have to list in the recall bylaw somewhere that the select board would have the authority to appoint someone if that person is involved in the recall.
What if we did this? What if we simplified it this way? And I think it's a good suggestion, actually, both Steve and Rich. What if we just simplified it to state that if the town attorney happens to be the person who's the subject of the recall, then give the select board the authority to certify that
You mean-
piece of the recall bylaw.
You mean a clerk, Al, right? Not the town attorney.
I'm sorry, yes, I meant, so the town clerk, the person who would normally certify that, rather than have the select board appoint somebody else to certify it, why don't we just have them certify it?
I'd be okay with that as long as they weren't one of the three being recalled.
I
Right,
think it comes back to the original point that the Board of Selectmen don't have the authority under Mass General Law to conduct elections.
Does the Board of Selectmen have the authority to appoint a temporary person? Because I'm looking at our bylaws under the select board, and I don't really see anything that,
That's under, General Law, Chapter 40, I think.
I'm looking to see if we've ever mentioned that, just out of curiosity, and I don't see it.
Again, I believe in general laws, they are allowed to appoint, whether it's a temporary basis or an alternate official, not an assistant, because an assistant is in addition to, whereas an alternate is in lieu of. They have the authority to do that.
But again, Steve, that's only if they're incapacitated, correct?
No, I just use that as an example. I use the example is if the elected official was incapacitated for some reason, they have the authority to do that, only as an example.
But
Is
if that is so, should we not put it under select board?
We could reinforce the select board's portion of the bylaw by stating and quoting, obviously in accordance with whatever general law it is, where the Board of Selectmen have the authority to appoint alternate elected officials.
Yeah, because we do have authority to appoint town administrator, and we said what the general law was, and we do have the authority to appoint town council under select board. So if we go that route, I think that should be added to.
So I'm
That'd
gonna
be a good idea.
suggest, go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you gotta be careful because, you're starting to tread on MGLs.
Yeah.
The select board only has so much authority to do so many things by MGL, so you just can't add things to their.
But he said it is under MGL.
It is, I'm absolutely sure that it is within general laws that Board of Selectmen can do that.
Steve, is that,
I gotta get, take care of a problem. So.
is that a clause that the town has to accept before they start using it?
No, I don't believe so. I'm going to see if I can search for it now.
Okay,
So I'm gonna suggest we do two things. I'm gonna suggest we maybe we say that as first choice. If that is accurate, what Steve is saying is accurate, I'm sure it probably is, but we're gonna double check it. If it's accurate, then we add the wording to allow the select board to appoint a temporary clerk should this situation occur. That would be like our first option. And if for some reason that doesn't work out, I think we should have another option. That way, we don't have to have 4 more meetings about what we're gonna do on this one topic.
Thank you.
Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so that's option A. I'm all for that. The rest of the group, does that seem to make sense to you? If it can be done?
Yes.
Okay, give me 1 second. All right. Oh,
But Al, wouldn't you also take out the word, I think it says approved? That way, when you read that, your first question would be who approves it, so we're gonna take that out,
Yeah,
correct?
we'll change that to make it match the wording that we're talking about, yeah.
Okay,
Reword it. We're gonna have to reword it. So if by chance, the select board cannot appoint a temporary town clerk, what's the next best way to handle it?
Then we put, if we can't have a specific quote from MGL, then we put it in our bylaws, saying that in the event that the clerk is not able to do that, because the clerk is the subject of the recall, then the Board of Selectmen shall appoint an alternate clerk to handle that duty. That's all you can do, I think.
Isn't that the same thing, though?
No, I think that if, I'm looking for the MGL right now, so let's see if we can.
We're not saying they have the power via MGL, we're just giving them if they don't have it in our bylaws.
Right, but I don't know that our bylaw
Do that?
can basically remove authority from an elected official.
Can't supersede MGLs.
Right. That's why I'm wondering if we shouldn't have a backup option that doesn't include taking anything away from the town clerk in terms of that. Maybe if that doesn't work, we look at the process slightly differently and say, well, maybe it's certified. I don't know. I don't have the answer.
Can just the Board of Registrars?
Well, what if, Virginia, you're on something now. I was just thinking when you said that. The certification is left up to the Board of Registrars generally, okay? If the town clerk has a hard time getting the Board of Registrars together, then she'll do a lot of the certification. But it's the job of the Board of Registrars. What if the select board chooses a member of the Board of Registrars to be the temporary, I don't know, temporary chair in charge of or whatever?
Well,
We're gonna do it anyway.
if the Board of Registers is the one who's doing it anyway, are we having a lot of conversation about nothing?
No, because they work for they work for the town clerk, so,
She appoints them?
Clerk.
She appoints the Board of Registers?
the Board of Selectmen appoint the Board of Registrars. But they work in her department. They work under her.
So if the so I think the answer is, we'll give the authority to the Board of Registers. They already have it. And if for some reason there's a conflict there, the select board can appoint, alternate board, an alternate board of registers. If they already have that authority, we're not taking anything away from them. They're just, they're appointing another one for a very specific purpose. And we're not taking authority away from an elected official. So there's no issue.
Are you sure that the real issue doesn't evolve around who's going to call the election? I mean, obviously, the selectmen are going to sign a warrant, but somebody has to run an election. I'm not sure the Board of Registrars have the authority to run an election.
I think Bob's right.
Yeah,
Good thought,
wouldn't it
Bob. No,
it is.
Which just muddies the water even more.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. No, it's a good point. I wish it wasn't a good point, but it is.
well, wouldn't the town clerk run the election? And they would follow out the recall bylaw.
I think what they're saying,
The recall bylaw states when a new election will be, how many days after such and such. The bylaw determines that an election is needed and the clerk will follow through on it.
You just have to hope that if the clerk is going to be removed, the petition isn't for reasons relating to this use of whatever the resources were in the last election.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I really doubt that the town clerk would be recalled, to tell you the truth. I could give you a list. It's possible, but not likely.
Well, I think the reality of it is we have to do the best with this as we can, and we also have to realize that it's probably not going to be perfect because it's dealing with an imperfect situation. You know, so I think that, you know, we can regulate this as best as we can, and no matter what we do, if we came up with the diamond, you know, version of this,
You find something.
it's still going to be litigated no matter what you do. So,
Steve, did you find anything?
I'm working on it. Of course, it's, you know, like the easiest document to research.
Yeah, right.
exactly.
Okay.
I think that we probably, you know, in terms of the certification, the Board of Registers are going to normally do that. I think we leave that alone. I'm not even sure that we have to state that. It already is, you know, that's their job.
That's given.
You know, so I think we leave that alone. Maybe we leave it all alone. And then if Steve can find the wording in the MGL that says the select board has that authority, well, then we put it in there and say, in the case that the town clerk is the person who's recalled, the select board has the authority. The reality of it is if the select board already has that authority, we're not giving it to them. They already have it. So if they have it, it probably doesn't even need to be in the recall bylaw. Not that it's not a bad idea to mention it and kind of clarify it. So I think that, you know, we can change the wording, you know, removing the word approved and kind of rewording that. That's a good point. And then I think we're in relatively solid ground, especially if Steve can find the area where it says, if need be, the select board can appoint, you know, an interim or an alternate town clerk for the specific issue. And that person would be the person who would run that election.
Okay.
That makes sense? Kinda?
That's
Yeah.
fine.
All right, so I'm just gonna leave it that way. We'll see what Steve comes back with. If Steve comes, I'll make that change. And if Steve comes back with wording that says, yep, this is what then we'll add it. We'll add wording to that. Saying, in the event it's the town clerk, they can do this. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that was the rest of board members good, or members good with that?
Good.
Good.
Steve?
Yeah, that's fine. I found the assistant one, not the alternate one. Oh, well.
All right, so the second issue Rich brought up, this one makes a lot of sense. One of the things that was part of the bylaw, the timeframe of the bylaw was that clerk had 5 days to produce the number of documents to whoever was petitioning. That took 5 days away from their 28-day timeframe to get 1,000 signatures, which is short. So Rich had suggested that just making it 28 days after the forms are handed out by the or provided by the town clerk. To me, that seems to make sense. I think it's a pretty simple fix wording wise. We just change it. Did I explain that right, Rich?
Yes, yes, you did.
Okay. Group members have any other?
Yeah, no
that's
problem.
to me.
That
Okay.
sounds good to me.
All right, I'll make those changes as well. Rich, thanks for those. Those were really good. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So two other things during the bylaw hearing. They were both from Glenn Sexton. He had made the suggestion that as we get closer to the town meeting, just ensure that the drone bylaw is updated to the FAA regs, which seems to make sense, and we can certainly do that. I don't know that we need to take any action right now. You know, if we found out that there was some drastic change to the drone regulations, maybe we'd have to have another meeting. But that was a good suggestion. The other suggestion from Glenn was to change the wording of the committee to keep it up and running all the time for continuity and for any other types of needs, that bylaw needs that might come up in between the terms. Again, I thought that was a really good idea because from time to time bylaws have to state it. And my guess is it's probably a really good
I'm sorry, I had to get the toy away from my dog.
I was wondering what that was. So I think that was a really good suggestion, and I would not be opposed to changing the wording of the bylaw review committee piece of it, just to say that they're up and the group would stay up and running. To
Just an
Take up-
appointed standing committee,
say again?
an appointed standing committee.
Yeah,
Means part of their annual appointments.
that works for me. Anybody else? Any comments? All right, I'll change the wording to include that as well, as long as you trust me to change the wording.
I do have a comment, because at first he talked about staggering the appointments of the standing committee.
Yep.
I don't know if I'd stagger it. I'd have a committee, like, you know how you appoint a committee for a certain number of years. I don't know if you were thinking of still staggering it or not.
I think we started to, I think that conversation kind of morphed a little bit. I think what he initially was, he was suggesting exactly what I just said, but I also think that what he was trying to do was provide that continuity where, okay, so for instance, when these bylaws pass, the five of us, we go our separate ways and we don't think about bylaws ever again.
Mhm.
Lost to the town because, you know, the people that just did the most work on the bylaws and are familiar with the process and where things were and how they got to where we are gone. I think what he was trying to suggest was that to keep the continuity of the group, make people's kind of like the select board, one every year. That way that you're not always turning over the entire board and there's you know, one person up every year. I think it kind of morphed into the conversation we're having now, where he was trying to get the continuity of the board to always just be there, always have it. I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to turn that over every, you know, especially if you make them 1 year appointments, it doesn't matter. Right? Because if you make it, the appointment to a bylaw review committee is 1 year, we can all be it for the next 20 years.
Mhm.
If we, you know, agree to it. Whereas, you know, the elections are different. They've got to come up. That's why it makes sense to rotate them.
The other idea, Al, was that instead of having to wait to change bylaws in a 5-year period, which turned into a 10-year period or 20-year period, at least you can change them every year at the annual town meeting. If something does come up, we can meet, come up with a bylaw change, and then have it presented at the annual town meeting. It doesn't have to wait for a wholesale change. We could do one at a time, or
And that's exactly what, in fact, Glenn mentioned it. Glenn mentioned that happening because with the marijuana bylaw committee, the select board, so the laws changed in terms of, you know, marijuana and, you know, it's legal to sell, things like that. So the town had to come up with a bylaw to address that. So they had another committee, I forget what they called it. I think it was the marijuana bylaw committee. I don't remember what it was called. I was on it, Glenn was on it. We ran the proposals from that committee by this committee, which a little bit like duplicated, but you know, it made sense because that was a pretty detailed situation. But I was also allowed this committee to take a look at it and see, okay, does it create any other issues anywhere else? And it didn't. In fact, we changed we changed our we actually framed that bylaw by the public consumption bylaw by the alcohol consumption bylaw, the public consumption in town. So he actually used that as an example, and I think it's a great idea. And I just think that my personal opinion is if we use something along the lines of what Brian said, make it a standing committee, you know, appointments to last 1 year, just like the other 1 year appointments that the select board do every year, they could just appoint people to that committee.
another perfect example is the drone bylaw. That's a new deal for everybody. So, I mean,
Yeah.
we wouldn't wait 5 years to do that now. It's too important. We need to get that in there.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Good, okay.
Mr.
right.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I did find it as chapter 41, section 14, temporary clerk. And in part, it says, the selectmen may, in writing, under their hands, appoint a clerk for the performance thereof. And the question would be is we can refer this to town council as to whether or not, given the circumstance of appointing a clerk because the clerk is being recalled or in the process of being recalled, if this would be an applicable statute to reference.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for researching that and finding it. And I will ask the town attorney.
Mhm.
And if he says, yes, it would apply, group okay with me changing the wording to add that? to
Yes.
the bylaw? If it's not, we'll stay on course as we've already agreed. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Steve, thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
So keep moving. We had got a suggestion from a resident, Kim Bernier Goldsmith, to possibly adjust the animal control bylaws. The issue that she was suggesting was that there was an issue with the kennel inspections where she thought it was too vague to say, like, for instance, it says that let me find it and read it here. She was trying to take some discretion away from, what happens in a kennel inspection. And she referenced Massachusetts General Law 140, 174E, which is basically the animal control law. And 174E outlines a great many things, like tethering dogs. It's all things kind of like safety related to animals. And I think it would be very easy enough to just have our bylaws take away, the negative finding, and then have it basically outline what she's suggesting. Basically saying if the dog officer or the inspector finds a violation of 140 section 174E, then the discipline, they have 10 days and then the discipline. So basically it just outlines what a failed inspection would be failed for, without having to list it. Like it's literally at least 2 pages long. You just reference the law, which basically says it's from A to whatever it is, all the different violations of it. I'd be fine with that. It seems to make sense.
Yep. No problem here.
Fine.
Yes.
All right. Give me 1 second. Okay, great. Sorry, I'm just trying to be my secretary here too. Okay. Now, if I can get organized. We received, and I forwarded to the group, a great many suggestions from John and Bob. And I think probably the best way to go through those is just one after the other. So having said that, the first item that John talked about, and I'm going to say John because the email came from John. It's very well could be from Bob as well. It was in regards to the annual town meeting dates, and the questions surrounded that were basically, are we making it too rigid? Would there be some flexibility to allow for further dates in the future? One of the things John mentioned, wouldn't it just be easy enough for the town to meet on that date, adjourn to another date outside, and now we're making this kind of ridiculous jump through hoops type of situation? Brian?
Can I try?
Sure.
Because the idea behind it, John, was to keep everything in the month of May. The superintendent came to us and said that she has to hand out pink slips by the 1st of June. And with the money issues always taking place in July and June instead of May at the annual town meeting, she didn't know what she had for funds, if she had to issue pink slips or not issue pink slips. So at that point, we sat back and said, well, okay, why can't we do, I had asked Chris, why can't we do the 2 meetings in May? Chris said, we can. And I said, well, we started waiting until June because we waited for the cherry sheet. And Chris said, the cherry sheet's not coming in until after summer usually now. So at that point, we said, well, they preferred to have the two meetings, one without money and one with money. Okay, like we've been doing. So we just sat back and said, well, why don't we just have it 2 weeks after the first meeting that doesn't ask for appropriating money, and then have that appropriation of money 2 weeks later, still in the month of May, and not going into the month of June to help out the school department. That's how that all came about.
Right, and I remember some of those conversations. The point I was making was that there's the flexibility right now to actually do anything you want. The select board and the town moderator and anybody else that's involved, town administrator, can decide usually in March when they want to have the town meeting and whether they want it to be 1 day or 2 days, and when they expect would be a reasonable time to have the second day. And it depends upon not the cherry sheet, but the best information that'd be available from the state legislatures, what they're doing with their budget is, I think, the determining factor there. So that I don't see any point in putting in a second date into the bylaws and tie us into a particular second date. A second day in May is good as a practice, but to pin it down to a specific time, I don't think makes any sense. And one reason is that you talk about if needed a second day, but what about if a third day is needed? You know, you sort of set the bylaw up to say, here are the possibilities, but in fact, it doesn't include the possibilities. It only includes one of the possibilities. And actually, you get more possibilities by having nothing said about successive dates.
I think the simplistic answer to that, John, is that we were looking for continuity. If everybody knows, you know, right now, May's a bit busy month. We have elections. Everybody knows when the election is. Everybody knows when the town meeting is. Well, the second part of the town meeting was just out there someplace. So we thought it would add continuity. That's all.
You know, I think one of the things that I think one of the things we could do, one of the things I hadn't thought about was in recent history, I'm not sure that this has happened, but you know, the question, what if there needs to be more than a second date? And I don't know, like I said, I don't know if that's happened, but I guess the possibility exists. Would it be easy enough just to add, well, I guess my first question is this: who actually sets is the moderator the person who sets the date for the annual town meeting?
It's in the bylaws.
Yeah,
It's in the bylaws.
The moderator
Right.
calls it and then she can postpone it. She can turn around and she can adjourn it, move it to the next day.
That was my point, and I realize it's in the bylaws. I meant if we go over day one, who then when day two is right now? The moderator, right?
Moderator.
No, not necessarily. Because the way it's been done in the last few years is the very first article was addressing the issue of when things were going to be voted upon.
Right.
So that it said articles this to this were going to be done on this date and the rest on another date. So it's in the actual warrant that the second date was being determined. However, in the event that there's no second date in there, the moderator can recess the meeting until any date he or she wants.
Right. Yep. I forgot about that. You're right. So to the group, what do we?
Let me just follow up on what Bob said for a minute, because what that would mean is that the select board, when they publish the first warrants, could say that we're on the first Tuesday or second Tuesday in May, we're going to talk about these articles. And then on the third Thursday in June, we're going to talk about these other articles. They put that in the warrant. Then we hold a second meeting on the fourth Tuesday in May and do what? Nothing. Because everything has been determined in the warrant that this is going to be happening on this day and this is going to be happening on the other day. So again, it becomes, the whole thing is still within the control of the select board and the town moderator. And there's nothing the bylaws can do that can change that. They're going to have control of that no matter what you do. So this just puts in something that seems to me to be a meaningless statement.
Well, I think if the bylaws say that day one and day two are going to be on these dates, then I don't know that it's a meaningless statement from the perspective of, you know, the select board has to follow the bylaws.
Yeah,
So
but they don't have to have any agenda items. they state in the first set of bylaws, and they say to the town, here's what we're going to do on the first Tuesday or the second Tuesday in May. And
Yep.
here's what we're going to do on the third Thursday in June. We're also going to have a meeting on the fourth Tuesday in May, or whatever the other time, the fourth Tuesday in May. And on that day, we're going to hand out the Gold Cane Award.
What's
Okay.
what's to stop them from doing that now, John? What's to stop them from having, like, right now, I forget off the top of my head what they say, but right now, the town bylaws say you have to, the town meeting's gonna be on the first Tuesday in May. All right, so what's to stop them from coming in the first Tuesday in May and say, we're not covering anything today, we're gonna cover it July 6th?
Nothing. And matter of fact, we even didn't have our meeting on the first Tuesday in May this year. It wasn't held at all. It's in the bylaws. Should be the first Tuesday in May. No. You got other options here. So
Yeah.
this is kind of a thing that says, here's what we do as a town, and here's the kinds of the principles that we agree with as a town. And that is that we're going to hold a town meeting at the beginning of May. But beyond that, you don't really have any control. You know, if any one of you were in charge of the select board, you have all these options, and believe me, you would use them if they seemed reasonable. If there were financial difficulties that you had to get resolved, or financial uncertainties that had to be resolved, you'd have no hesitation at all of putting this thing off until the end of June. We put it off because the legislature allowed us to do it into July, you know, so there's a lot of power there right now. And I don't think that anything that we're going to do is change it. So I would suggest that we not try to put in conditions that then have to be fairly easily gone around.
You know, the only reason it's even be under consideration is because the schools have the June 1st date for notices. For all we know, the next contract they sign will have May 15th as a date for notices.
Good point, Bob.
It's not the contract, is it? Isn't it the state requirement?
No, that's a union contract.
Is it?
Contract. Yes,
Yeah, I think
contract.
you're right about that. And
Right.
that's the point, Bob. Well, I put it to the group. What do you think? What do you want? Do you want to make any changes? Do you want to leave it where it is? I mean, we all know what right now that we're proposing this bylaw on the information that we have right now. If the school, to Bob's point, were to go and change that, well, then they would then be, you know, working against their own interest, which certainly could happen. And then whoever's on the bylaw review committee after these get passed have to think about changing that if they wanted to. So, you know, I leave it to the group. Do you think we should make any changes? Should we leave it the way it is?
I'd like
I
to have input from the town administrator on this.
I do
Yeah.
too.
I don't think
It's
he's
the
with us.
It's the town administrator that really will set the date and then get in touch with the town moderator and say, it looks like it's going to be blah, 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 such and such a date.
I can go in
And get-
any direction. I just like to hear what Chris has to say. I really would.
I would run it by Chris.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we do that. If he doesn't come to a meeting, I'm not sure how we're going to do that
Oh,
without violating the open meeting laws. So I'm not quite sure how to handle that.
He could send an email to each one of you outlining his position
Yeah,
with no words about, get back to me with how you feel.
Sure, he's
So
not
I
listening to us.
So I guess the question becomes this. We know what our intention was to do. Our intention was to set up the meeting schedule to help deal with a problem that the school had with the pink slips. Chris at the time seemed to be on board with it and didn't think that we were going to get, you know, that much more information after, under normal circumstances, after that second meeting in May, that there wouldn't be, generally speaking, you know, we can't really use this year's example because this is obviously not standard. And certainly that everything was put off. They're doing the whole 112 thing. I get that. So this really isn't what this was set out for. This was set out for your normal situations where on a yearly basis, you know, normal budget procedures are going to happen. Normal situations are going to be going on at the schools. That's what this attempted to kind of handle. Do we want to leave it the way it is? Or do we want to try to make some sort of change?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we simply keep it as we have our draft with the second, excuse me, the
Second meeting date.
the second Tuesday of May and the fourth, if needed. And we can certainly leave the question open to be handled by the future standing bylaw review committee to address as needed in the future. If there's a problem with it, then let them deal with it.
Yeah,
I think
what you're
what
you're
what
putting restrictions now on that don't exist. All of the things that you're trying to do here are already within everybody's power. It simply has to be declared. And what we're doing is saying that the flexibility that allows them is going to be taken away. Because now you're going to have to jump through some hoops in order to get back the flexibility that you have. And without a good reason other than there's a union contract that's got to be honored by June 1st, which everybody knows now, and it hasn't affected anything that's ever been done on the scheduling. I don't see the point of it. And I guess I would prefer to have bylaws be fairly clear on some of these points. And if, rather than putting in things which just are mere obstacles to get around, but can easily be gotten around by anybody. Whatever you want, whatever we want to do on the town meeting is just entirely up to the town administrator and the select board. And nothing we say in here is going to make any change. It's just not going to change that.
If you leave in a second meeting at the end of May, it means that all your financial work is going to have to be finished around the middle of April. And that is, generally speaking, before the legislature or the House anyways, says anything at all about what their feeling is on revenue for the town.
That
So
was
I think
precisely my point, Bob, that you just said, because I wanted to keep it the way we are currently doing it. We do it in May and in June. And it was only because of the superintendent of schools saying that tied her hands in terms of issuing pink slips, but
And in the face of a 10% increase or 20% decrease in state aid to the town, not one teacher was given a notice.
yes, that's a very good point that you just made there, Robert, because in contrast to what their plead was to get this thing done before June, they made no attempt to modify that because we had no idea what state revenue or state reimbursement was going to be. So it's kind of ironic, I think.
It's another example of trying to control something which you really don't have any control over. You know?
So I guess my question would be, why do we set a date for the town meeting at all in the bylaws? Even now, forget about the changes we're talking about. I mean, the way they exist right now, why do we even have it in the bylaws?
You probably have to, I would suspect, but I don't know for certain.
Could be.
I would guess the same thing, but
You know, probably that's what it means to be a town. I don't know I've never looked at the rules and regulations and asked General, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if towns are required to have an annual meeting.
yeah, you've got to have an annual meeting. That
No,
much
you
is
need-
for sure.
No, but your question is, that the date have to appear in the bylaws?
I
Does
just
don't
the-
know.
Are you, or is it just enough to say there will be an annual town meeting? That's the question, I guess.
Well, as a practical matter, it helps on planning. If you didn't have specifically a date for the beginning of the first town meeting, then what's to propel the whole process of putting together budgets? What's to propel the whole process of figuring out what you want to do in the next fiscal year? Just as a good business practice, you would want to set some date.
Can it be worded the way you just suggested? The beginning of the annual town meeting will occur on, and then give whatever we want to give as our day. And beginning implies that it might go on more than that, but we're not, it'll be determined at that point.
You wouldn't necessarily want to do it because you'd have to say the same thing about special town meetings too. That's just a feature of any town meeting, that it can be recessed and continued at a separate time. So I don't think that's needed in your bylaws, because it's what happens. So I think the way it's worded over the annual town meeting for the transaction of business, if you want to keep business in there, shall be held on the second Tuesday in May. Basically exactly what we have right now. And just leave it like that, and then recognize though that if as a town we want these other things to happen, then that has to become what part of the culture of the town is. And right now it is. It's what the culture of the town is. The change that you're asking the town to make is to think about trying to do this all in May rather than in June for the second piece. But again, you're weighing what is the school contract and whether they even intend to do anything about that versus what you might want to do about the financials. And even on that, I mean, I don't have any problem with always thinking that formally we're going to go ahead and do the second meeting in May, because you can always come back with another town meeting. You can always call another special town meeting and adjust the
Yeah.
budget. I mean, all that flexibility is there.
So.
We're a small town. Let's not hamper ourselves more than we have to.
Yeah, I think we could do something as simple, and maybe it's even just saying what the moderator's powers already are, that, we would do the first date, the second date, and then on any subsequent dates as directed by the town moderator or town meeting. That way, you have the flexibility to go into other dates. But we're trying to, keep to the mentality of getting it done as early as possible.
John's saying don't even put the second date. Am I right, John?
I don't even put the second day. Just put the date that the thing starts.
He's saying just put the first date and then say the end that you just said. Subsequent,
Mhm.
this will be determined by the,
I would suggest leaving the second date and adding the wording about the moderator. I don't see how that hurts anything.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, why do that for the town meeting and not special town meetings?
Well, we could. We're really talking about the special town meetings. This is the meeting related to, the majority of the budget process. And we were doing it for a very specific purpose, trying to get that, that budget calendar kind of as compacted as possible, understanding that it's not always going to be perfect. So we can talk about doing similar things for this special town meetings as well, but that's not what we're talking about.
All right. I think the point I was trying to make is that there is already the authority there to do that. The idea of instilling a change in culture, I don't think is best handled through legal means. And as I maybe too many times tried to say, that in fact it can't work because the authority is there to change all of this. That right now, this is just more of something that we say to make sure that the town understands this is the way the town operates. But whether you stick to this, even this particular date, is really up to the town administrator and the town moderator and the select board. They got a tremendous amount of authority to basically do whatever they want. And sometimes they have to go through, they have to jump through a hoop to do it, but it's a minor hoop. It just, if you're asked why is it in here, and the answer is, well, because we want to be able to let off teachers. We want to be able to give pink slips to teachers. That's not really a good idea. And yet that seems to be the reason why it's in here. Everybody wants to say that. The reason it's in here is because we want to be able to give pink slips to teachers. You can give pink slips to teachers now. No,
actually, it's exactly the opposite of that. They don't want to have to give the teachers pink slips if they don't have to.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. I mean, it sounds like I'm not trying to be funny. They would. Yeah. The issue is not giving out the pink slips. The issue is hopefully not giving out pink slips that you don't have to, because you don't know what the situation looks like. You know, that was what we were all trying to address, you know.
It's another part of the culture.
Yearly constant pink slips. So Brian, Virginia, Steve, I put it to the four of us to make a decision here. What do we want to do? We can leave it the way we've drafted it. We can leave it the way it exists. We can add to the wording that we're proposing to, you know, other subsequent dates as directed by the moderator.
Do you have the original language right in front of you, Al?
Yeah, I can get it. Hold on one second.
You mean in the old bylaws?
The current
Oh, the
bylaws?
current bylaws? Yeah. No, I meant in the original one, we had 2 dates too, didn't we?
So the way it says, that's the election, never mind. So the annual town meeting for the transaction of business shall be held on the second Monday in May. That's what it says. Now, existing. And all we added to that was the second meeting language
And change it to a Tuesday.
to a Tuesday, yeah. I think I would be fine with leaving the proposed wording the way we have it and adding language that says, or on subsequent dates as directed by the moderator.
How
Thoughts?
about that?
I don't think you need to add the additional language. That's my opinion. Just leave it the way we have it proposed.
I would be okay with that as well. Virginia?
I don't think you need to add the ending either.
So are we back to where we are proposed?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, so the second item on John's list was, give me a minute, I gotta get organized again.
10 voters.
All right, so it was the warrants,
Yeah.
right? So the second one was, 10 registered voters in Granby may petition the select board asking for insertion of an article in the warrant for the annual town meeting. If the petition is accepted, there shall be appended to the article the name of the first person signing the petitions, the words, and the others. And so John's questions were like, that question statement, like, basically said that this gives the select board an extraordinary, power over the agenda for the town meeting. Should we have a mechanism to allow citizen input, for a large number of voters to get something on the annual town warrant? That was the first question. The second question, well, let's start with the first question. John, did you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, it really depends on what your intention is here, because right now there is no way for someone to get something onto the town warrant for the annual town meeting. And
John, let me interrupt. My looking at the bylaw shows that these 3 articles are exactly the way they are in the bylaws today. In other words, there's nothing new in these, in the 3 on the warrant.
That's generally correct. And I think just clarification is there was always some concern about petitioned articles as to who was going to present them in the past. And what this is just attempting to do is to identify who is going to present the petitioned article. And the simplest thing is the first name on the petition and to include and others. That's all.
It's a petitioner. Always was a petitioner.
I think
The first name.
First name.
right. And I don't want to put words in John's mouth, but I think John's question was more to the point of, should there be a mechanism for a large number of residents who are similarly minded about a specific issue to get a warrant on the town meeting floor? John, is that right?
yeah, because you could do it for special town meeting, according to this, but why not the town meeting?
Well, there is. You have 10 voters can petition for an article.
Yeah, but the select board can reject it.
They can. But I think this is all based upon general law in terms of what's stated in general law.
Why is there a difference between the town meeting and the special town meeting?
Because we have to have an annual town meeting.
Right.
We do not have to have special town meetings. And in fact, we may not ever have a special town meeting, although that's not been the case. But the purpose of that is a special town meeting costs the town additional money. So that's why the standard of having voters petition for an article at a special town meeting is higher because of the costs involved, is one reason.
You know, another reason I think too, and I could be wrong about this and maybe reading into it, but I would be concerned with, especially the annual town meeting, which is, you know, generally speaking, responsible for the entirety of the budget for the town. I'd be really concerned about any certain groups hijacking that meeting or the funding of the town with some insane budget request or capital request based on, you know, one thing that would, and I'm wondering if that wasn't a piece of it. In other words, not allowing any one group to hijack the town meeting in the budget.
Well, okay, let's say that the town meeting goes as it does now, and then right after the town meeting is over, someone gets up a petition and gets 800 residents in town to sign it, saying that we want to make the school budget for next year $1 million more than what was approved at the previous town meeting. So, and then they make that as an article to go to the select board, asking for a special town meeting to be called on that subject. All right, and then it has to be done according to what we've said here. And then it's done, and at that meeting, they vote to change the budget. Isn't that a hijacking?
First off, the timing you suggested, John, is a little bit wrong because it wouldn't be right after. It's going to have to be in the next fiscal year when that's held, because they can't amend the article from the town meeting.
That's fine. That's fine, because remember, the way the budget process works is that we vote the school $8 million for their operations. We don't vote it by month. We vote them a lump sum. If I were in charge of the schools and I knew I could get 800 people to sign this petition, then I would just go ahead and start the school year off and hire everybody to do what I wanted to do, knowing that if there were no additional budget, you run out of money in February. But you wouldn't be worrying about that because you knew you were going to have a town meeting, a special town meeting, to vote specifically on increasing your budget by $1 million. I think that fits your definition of a hijack.
So what are you suggesting with that, John?
Well, all I'm suggesting is that these things didn't seem to mesh with me, and whether they're in there, I actually didn't read the current bylaws around this portion, so it could still be in there. But it just seems to me that this doesn't really mesh. That if we're going to allow for these things to happen, we might as well allow them to happen at the town meeting, as opposed to saying that right now you can do it anyway, but you have to go through all these other circumnavigations.
All right. Just as a point of clarification, these 10 voters and the 100 voters is based in reflecting or restating Chapter 39, Section 10 regarding warrants on town meetings. And it specifically says at the annual by 10 or more, and at a special must be 100. So it's state law. Apparently this is just reflecting or repeating what's in state law.
Well, we're talking about something that we really can't change anyway.
Right. So the only purpose, as I recall, the meeting was the issue of who is going to present the petition. And the language that we chose was basically the first person on the petition to present the article. Because it's not up to the town, to the Board of Selectmen or anyone else for that matter, to present a petitioned article.
The Mass General laws are not the end all and be all. Mass General laws will say that if they say that this can happen, they do not say that other things can't happen. They do not say that's the only thing that can happen. So if you say, all right, Mass General law, and you think that you have to put it into your bylaws, that with 10 votes, you can do so-and-so, that doesn't stop you from saying, however, with 100 votes or with 500 votes, you can do something else.
Well, you have to be careful on how you're phrasing that, John, because we certainly can't do 8, for example, for an annual. It has to be at least 10.
Yeah, but you can have another bylaw that says, here's what you can do with 10 required by the state. Don't even put it in the bylaws, just make reference to it like you're doing to the other thing. And then write in, and if you get 100 votes, if you get a petition with 100 names on it, then you can get it on the annual town meeting. I don't know.
John, if I want to hijack the school budget, I'm not going to do a petition. I'm going to stand up and make an amendment. That's all it takes to spend money at the annual town meeting, is to amend anybody's budget.
That's right. And it has happened.
So the hijacking is only going to occur
Well,
at a special town meeting.
I don't know. I don't know if that's correct. I know that it's correct within certain tolerances. But my experience going to town meetings is the town moderator has always had his or her own view as to what a more or less means in the official warrant. And that if you start off with a budget, say, start off with a highway budget of $400,000. It doesn't seem to be within the spirit of more or less to say, well, let's make that $1,400,000 for next year. I don't think that's possible. I think the moderator can just reject that out of hand.
Yes.
So, yeah, so my feeling is this, the wording is the existing wording, it's not a change. That we know of, it hasn't been a major issue. I'm open to changes, but I don't see why we really need to change it.
I agree. There's no need to change it except to include who's going to present the petition article. That was the only purpose of that change, was to clarify that.
But my question is that, is this in fact what we want to do as a town? It's what we do now. Okay, let's say it's in the bylaw. Is that we want to do? We want to take away all authority from people to put other items on the annual town warrant.
We're not taking away any authority. They get the 10 signatures for an annual, based upon Chapter 39, Section 10, they can do so. And it still also says in there, bear with me here in terms of finding the exact language, but all we did here was, as I recall, Al, is that we just changed who is the presenter of the article, of the petition article.
Steve, I would say that your interpretation was correct if you eliminated the words, if the petition is accepted.
All right, well, let me find the language in Mass General Law if you give me a second.
Now, the point is, if it has to be accepted by the select board, then this is meaningless. Nothing goes on unless the select board wants it.
But going back to what Bob said, you are right. At the annual town meeting, you can stand up and you can amend.
You can amend, but you can't put something new on.
Right.
But a lot of the times, when you're amending and how you're amending,
This has nothing to do with money. Money is one thing that can be used, but there are a lot of things that can go on a warrant article. Can force the town to take certain actions. Can force the town to stop doing certain things. And right now, there's no way for anything to be done on a town warrant article unless it's accepted by the select board. And if we want to keep it that way, that's fine. I'm not arguing one way or another against that. What I'm saying is that that's what this does. And if your intention was to allow some more citizen input into the town meeting, as well as the special town meetings, this doesn't do it.
You know, I think, John, what you just said makes a lot of sense to me, and it kind of clarified things for me. I'm okay with the select board having that amount of authority over what goes on the town meeting warrant. I'm sorry, the town meeting agenda. I think that it should be limited to the issues that have been vetted by somebody. And what better board to do that than the ones that apparently the majority have voted for. And certainly that doesn't preclude people from doing things and asking for a special town meeting, but it separates it from that major piece of the budget process. To me, I think it makes sense. So I guess I'm suggesting leaving it the way it is.
I don't have a problem with that. I was not in on any earlier conversation, so I don't know what the intention was. I was just raising that as a point, that if the intention was something different than this
Right.
thing. So
Yeah.
I don't care myself.
But to the board members, do we want to leave it as it is?
Yes.
Yes,
I've got one little suggestion though, just
Sure, go
for
ahead, Bob.
clarification. Boom, 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 boom. Where is it? Under 100 registered voters, one.
Mhm.
Yep.
It's not be inserted on the next called special town meeting, and then to insert the words after certification of the petition. Because if somebody were to bring in
I'll do the whole thing. Don't worry about it.
bring in something, you could have the period of time from when the petition is received and when it's certified, that a Board of Selectmen posts a warrant for a special town meeting. In which case it would then go on that one. I would think that it should, the time element of the next should start once the petition is certified, not when it's received.
That's correct. I believe that's the way it is supposed to be done.
So what you're suggesting, Bob, is add wording to
Yeah.
say, once the petition is certified.
Certified?
I'm completely okay with that. That makes sense to me.
That makes sense.
Brian, you good with that?
I'm good with that.
All right. Okay, moving on to item 3. Where am I here?
That's where we were, I thought, kind of, sort
It
of.
was item 2. Now, item 3.
Well, we just talked
Special
about
town
that.
meetings for transaction of business may be called by the select board at their discretion. In addition, the questions were, what happens if a special town meeting's already been called, but it's still time to get it on the warrant? Can 200 registered voters request a special town meeting without specifying the agenda or the warrant article? I think that, I guess my feeling is if a town meeting or a special town meeting's already been posted, then any new item that comes forward after posting should have to go for the next one.
That's correct.
I don't think the town should have to stop, retract anything that's been put up. And that's something that,
Right,
That's
no,
a
no,
simple-
absolutely. Once the warrant is posted, you shouldn't be able to add to the warrant. But what if the meeting has been called, but if the warrant hasn't been posted? And that happens sometimes, when this meeting is scheduled. Maybe called means something specifically, but I know that meetings have been scheduled and then the town warrant, and then the warrant is put together. Look at the annual town meeting. That's scheduled a year in advance. And yet the warrant isn't posted until, right? So I think the same thing can happen with special town meetings. And there's another reason for thinking that we'll go back and look at the wording of this, because this next called special town meeting, I'm not sure that that's the right phrase for what we're trying to accomplish. And because what I'm wondering is this. All right, a petition comes in with 100 signatures. So the select board says, yep, we got to do this. We don't want to, we've got to do this. So we're going to call a special town meeting for June 29th. And we're going to address this issue then. We're calling for the meeting right now. So we set this for meeting June 29th. Now we're going to have a whole host of special town meetings between now and June 29th. But we're not going to address this issue because we've made the next called meeting June 29th. We're doing it here today, and this will be on the agenda for that meeting. Is that what we want to be able to do? Gee, I'd love to have that power as a select board member.
I don't, again, these were existing things and that haven't been an issue.
A lot of things haven't been issues in the past.
Yeah, I also think we have to be careful not to create issues with overly wording things too.
That's what I'm suggesting, that I think overly wording is different from maybe tweaking some wording.
Yeah.
Well, let's back up for a minute here. I mean, basically, the purpose of any town meeting, whether it's special or annual or otherwise, is at the pleasure of and the discretion of the Board of Selectmen, period. The only time that something else may get involved is if there's a petition by the townspeople. That's the only time the Board of Selectmen have to consider adding some article on special town meeting or annual town meeting. The point is that the Board of Selectmen is their meeting. It's their meeting to conduct business of the town, whether it's annual to discuss and approve budgets, or if it's special to adopt other matters. It doesn't make any difference. They have the authority to do that. So what's the issue, I suppose?
The issue is if they don't want to do it.
Then,
If the issue is they don't want to do it.
okay, so I think that we might have, they can petition the article. If they can't get the signatures required, oh well. If they do and they don't, they get the required number of signatures and the selectmen still refuse, all right, then they have legal recourse. And we also have a bylaw saying recall these guys for not doing what you want.
Or not so much what you want. I think there's a difference between not doing what you want and not doing what the bylaws demand.
Calls for.
In that situation, just saying, I'm not doing it because I don't want to, the select board doesn't have that authority. And if, I think that, Steve, I had actually written down exactly what you just said before this meeting, that it directs the select board to do something. It gives people the opportunity to get something moved forward if they meet the criteria of the signatures.
Right.
I do think that maybe it makes sense to put some sort of time frame on that. In other words, if after the certification, it has to be on a special town meeting, I'm making this up, within 6 months. Maybe that's too far out. I'm just saying, I do think maybe it makes sense to dial that in a little bit to take away some of the political nature of it, where, to John's point, might say, well, I don't really want to do it as a select board member, so I'm going to postpone it until the last day of my term or something like that. Whereas if we put a reasonable time frame around it, and I'm open to whatever that reasonable amount of time looks like, 6 months is probably too long, and I understand that. I was just using that as a frame of reference. I think that would make sense to say, okay, it's got to be on a town meeting within 2 months, 3 months, whatever the committee thinks is reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point, that the first question is do we in fact want people of the town to be able to make the town address certain issues? And if we do, then we have to follow that up with wording that allows that to happen in spite of whatever opinions the people who are the real authorities have about the matter. Because they will have a lot of opportunities to thwart the issue through legal mechanisms of setting this meeting. And it will follow the wording of the bylaws, unless the wording of the bylaws is very specific as to what they can and can't do about that. Now, if you're not interested in having the people have that power, then we can leave it like it is and let it be worked around.
I've got a question, and I don't know if this influences your thought, John, or if I'm right, does it influence it? You said that the word call, and you gave an example of calling a meeting 2 months in the future. I think that the definition of calling a meeting is when the warrant is posted or the day it's signed. Prior to that, the selectmen can change their mind and never have that meeting. So I don't think it's actually called until such time as the warrant is signed. That doesn't take away, however, from the fact that it's still, the selectmen could, if they got a petition in, they could hold it forever and a day. I mean, if the.
To Brian, Virginia, and Steve, I think it makes sense to add a time frame to it. And I don't really know what that time frame should be. Is 60 days enough time? If we were to try to put a time frame on that, is 60 days, does that make sense? 90 days, maybe 90 days makes sense. I don't know. Couldn't hear you, Virginia.
I think 90 seems a lot. I think I would check with town clerk on this one.
Okay.
Because she seems to have a lot of, when you talk to her, suggestions about it takes this long to do whatever it is that they have to do at that end. But 90 seems way long.
So is the
What the
group,
point that Bob made though is very accurate too, about, you have to write something about when it appears on the warrant. Rather than calling the meeting.
Well, I mean, it's still, but it's the same thing. Like suppose, is exactly, the petition includes the wording for what you want. So you write that up and say, okay, at our meeting on June 29th, here's the warrant. We're posting a warrant for June 29th. Here it is. And then there you are. It doesn't even say here, I think, that it's got to be in the same fiscal year, does it?
No, I think the time constraint is,
So,
same.
I think the 60 days is probably a good time frame, but I think you also have to add something to make sure that it's done within the fiscal year. I mean, that basically,
Are you doing that, John, just for monetary questions?
no, you can think of examples where maybe the petition is to stop something from happening. Maybe
Well,
it's
there's no other recourse for that. I mean, if there's some issue that petitioners want to do, they have the means to petition courts to force any elected body to act or whatever. I'm not sure if I buy the argument. I mean, I was thinking back, trying to remember why, or the languages in there, if accepted, for example. And I remember now, part of the reason is that we have had in the past talk of having the Board of Selectmen have a petition article for an article that would be, in fact, in violation of state law. So those were totally rejected and not even considered. I'm not, I don't believe that we really have to put that language in at all, because having it in the same fiscal year, why? If it's some critical position where they want to stop, as you say, or force an action, yeah, they have recourse in the courts. Let them sue the Board of Selectmen.
I see that, looks like
Where's
Chris,
He's hiding in the dark. He's half hiding in the dark though.
we see you, Chris.
as long as there's a time frame, then that reduces the need to put in there something, because it basically gives any town per person notice. If they want to do something in this fiscal year, they've got to have the petition in more than 60 days before the end of the year. That's not unreasonable.
I like the idea of adding a time frame to it. I think it makes sense. Kind of a little bit. I'm not sure what to do to adjust for Bob's point. A suggestion on that? Hey, Chris, you mute yours?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, whatever. There was a bunch of noise. I thought it was coming from your office, like a vacuum cleaner or something. Guess not.
Not my office unless you're hearing the rain outside.
Oh, maybe.
Window open.
We're good now. So,
Oh.
go ahead, Brian.
Chapter 39, MGLs. The selectmen shall call a special town meeting upon request in writing of 200 registered voters, or 20% of the number of registered voters of the town, whichever number is lesser, and such meeting to be held not later than 45 days after receipt of such request.
Yeah,
What
that's
chapter and section was that? Brian, what chapter and section was that?
Chapter 39,
section 10.
All right, so
section 10.
I don't think we need to change anything then. If it's already exists in Mass General laws,
Yeah.
we could certainly reference we could reference the general law.
I don't think it's necessary.
So,
Chapter 39, section 10, Chris.
do we
Cal.
want to just leave it alone? If it exists, everything exists already in the Mass General Law that dictates what has to happen. We want to just leave it the way it is. Somebody's got a lot of feedback in the back. I'm not sure what it is.
One of the questions, I guess, is that if you're going to put in something which is already in Mass General Law, why would you put in just a piece of it and leave out a phrase? Why does it need to be in the bylaws at all? And if it does need to be in the bylaws, why are you putting in less than what it says in the law? Again, I don't know. The consistency is what I kind of.
I think we can make this real simple. I have no problem with adding the 45-day
Neither.
into there, and we can just reference the in line with the Mass General laws. I mean, I think we're really spending some time on this piece that's already dictated by law, but to John's point, why not just put it in there? I'm fine with it.
Me
That's
too.
fine. That's fine.
This was the portion about the 200 registered voters. All right, well, then maybe the answer is my other question is that this says that select board has to call a special meeting, a request of 200 voters. Doesn't say there has to be any topic. Doesn't say if there's be an agenda item. There's nothing there that's required, just that you have to call a meeting.
Well, you have to give them enough information to put whatever it is on the warrant.
That's what I'm asking.
Read it again, Brian.
The selectmen shall call a special town meeting upon request in writing of 200 registered voters or of 20% of the total number of registered voters of the town, whichever number is lesser. Such meeting to be held not later than 45 days after the receipt of such request. And I can read further, and shall insert in the warrant, therefore, all subjects the insertion of which shall be requested by said petition.
Okay, that answers my question, but that's not what we, again, then the issue is that what we say here isn't really what Mass law says. Because this last piece there was exactly what my question was, and it's in there in the Mass General Law. You have to have basically the warrant article.
I think it's a matter of adding another 5 words to it to say just what Brian said, but in a less legalese way. I'm okay with that. The group's okay with that.
Yep.
Any opposition?
No.
What do you think, Chris?
That's fine. Whichever way you guys want.
Great. All right. Moving on to item 4, and I know we're getting a little long here, but if everybody can bear with us, I'd like to get through this.
Let me maybe just back up just 1 minute.
We're trying to move forward, John, not back up.
Yeah, no, one of the questions was in the event, and I know this is highly unlikely, but in the event that you had 2 separate groups, 200 people with 2 different petitions, do the select board have to have 2 different meetings so they can cover everything in one meeting?
One meeting.
Yeah, I think that just follows logic, yeah. I don't think you have to have 2 separate meetings. As long as
No,
Questions, right?
just one meeting.
bring it up, as long as they have the opportunity to bring up their issue, I don't see why you'd have to have a separate town meeting for anything.
So the only problem would be then if one group came in with a petition and the select board set a meeting, and then after they set that meeting, but well within 45 days, somebody else came in with another petition. So you would have to have, you couldn't amend the warrant article for the first meeting to include everything for both meetings? Is that not allowed under Mass law?
You can include it as long as you meet the posting requirements of the meeting. That's the thing of what goes on the warrant is the posting requirements.
Right.
But a special town meeting, you have to have it within 14 days or have the selectmen sign the warrant 14 days and post it before the meeting. So if you
Right.
have two petitions, you can put anything on that warrant as long as the selectmen address it and sign it within that posting period.
Right, I understand that. The question is, what happens if a second petition comes in after the first warrant has been signed? Is there any flexibility for the select board to cover both of those in the same meeting? And which would mean I think you'd have to go back and amend the warrant. Maybe that's not
As
possible.
long, John, as long as you've got it in and you can post anything, we've changed the warrant many a times in a selectmen's meeting. We've added things to it as long as we have it done. And we've called special meetings of the board just to sign a revised warrant, right, Brian? We've done that before.
Yes, we have.
To
Chris.
include a warrant article that came in after a select board's meeting, but we could still get it on there before you have your town meeting. Why would we want to have to go and spend $3,200 for another town meeting just
That's exactly-
because?
That's exactly
Yes.
my,
And that's what we're doing, John. We can revise, as long as we have the warrant posted, the final warrant is posted 14 days before the date of the town meeting, we can change it as many times as we want, as long as I can get a majority of the board together to sign the revised warrant.
good. That's exactly the thing that I was asking, is that does the select board have that authority to do that? And what circumstances do they have the authority to do that? So you don't have to spend the time and effort of having a second town meeting. And it exists
Yes, they have that authority, yes.
as long as you're 14 days.
Because it is their warrant. It is their warrant. It's not somebody else's. The only items that can be addressed during the business of that meeting is what the selectmen say are going to be addressed. That's it. So we can change that as many times as we want, as long as we meet the posting requirements. That's it.
So I think we're good with item 3. Let's move on to item 4. The question was in regards to the posting of, the public posting of warrants in the annual town report. The first question John asked was, why is the word business inserted here? And I had to look at that.
Business meeting. Conducting the business of the town.
John, did you want to kind of explain what you were?
Well, annual town meeting is used in a number of places in the document. It's not called annual town business meeting. What is the purpose of adding in a word to what is a description of the annual town meeting? And why specifically here as opposed to anyplace else?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really have an answer to that. Anybody else?
No.
have any-
Could it be to distinguish from a town meeting quote election? Because the town election is called a town meeting in an awful lot of instances.
I think you were breaking up there. I didn't hear that, Bob.
I'm not breaking up, someone else is. A town election is also called a town meeting. So it may be that the use of the word business meeting is to distinguish it from the election meeting.
But it's not the annual town meeting.
Well, if you can find in the statutes, I'm pretty sure, words for an annual town meeting, and it's what's we consider to be the election.
I guess my feelings on this are this is what's existing now. I don't see it creating an issue. I can't say that I know the origin of it. I'm not sure that it makes its way. Group, we're gonna leave it, change it.
I can't find anything here in DMGLs on it.
Nor I. I think we can keep it, leave it alone.
I'd leave it.
Okay. All right. So the other part of item 4, John asked, should the town meeting booklet be included and being made available 7 days prior to the annual town meeting? And I asked Chris what his thoughts are on that, because that's gonna, a lot of that's gonna fall on you and your office to figure out, is that something that's doable or no?
Anything is doable as long as I get all the information into me in time from, like the finance committee, capital improvement, things of that nature.
Generally speaking, Chris, would you have that information in time to do that?
Well, the answer is yes. Usually the last piece, John, and you know this, John, is that I usually wait for the final statement from the finance committee on your insert at the beginning of the booklet.
Right.
Most of my stuff is usually done way in advance. And usually yours is the last piece that I insert. So it would fall more on if the finance committee feels that they could get the information to me in a timely manner.
John and Bob, it's on you now.
Well, my only experience with the finance committee has been 30 years and I haven't missed it yet, but it could happen, I guess. No, I don't think that's a problem. It was just the point that that's the booklet that people look at because it's got everything in it, rather than just the warrant articles, which has the bulk of what's in it when they're published. But I was just thinking that I don't recall actually seeing the warrant articles before the meeting, but I've seen the town booklet, which has the warrant articles in it. And it's, if the idea is that you want to make sure that people get the information that they need in a timely fashion before the meeting, then it ought to be all the information that they need. Stuff in the town booklet that they wouldn't otherwise have available to them. So
I think that's a good idea, John. However, the simple fact, and we've had a good history of being able to have that town booklet. However, I don't believe the town booklet is required. We do that as a matter of courtesy, I think, to the citizens of the town. I mean, the only thing we have to have is the annual report. So to commit us to something that we don't have to do, why are we doing that?
well, we've already done that. That was the whole point about the second meeting in May.
I've
So-
got two thoughts.
You answer the question.
One is, these bylaws say we're gonna be putting out a town meeting booklet. So it's not like there's an option as to whether we have one or don't have one, where earlier we said we would have one. My second thought is, I believe sometime within, I've got more years than you do, John, but sometime it was brought up that finance committee booklet was supposed to be out in the people's hands, I'm gonna say 2 weeks prior to the annual town meeting. And I don't know if that was a vote of the town meeting or a change to the bylaws or what.
My perspective of it is this. Finance committee says that they can do it. It normally gets done. Chris says do it. It's in the public interest to have that information ahead of time. I think we can add it. I think we can add it, and that's.
I think if we wait till the day of the town meeting to pass it out, it's wasteful because you don't have time to look at it. I mean, you really should be doing it ahead of time. And as you said, Chris said it can be done. John and Bob said their part can be done. So be it. Send it out earlier. Make it available earlier.
I agree with it. Anybody else? Any harsh disagreements from our group?
If you have a recall petition to get rid of the finance committee, maybe in the event they don't get it done, you can get rid of them.
There you go.
I got it right here, Bob.
Appointed committees.
How many things?
Thank God we're not elected.
All right, we'll add it. We'll add it. So the next issue under item 4 was the suggestion was to add a 7-day posting. I'm sorry, I was suggesting that his question was, hold on one second. Should there be a requirement for a warrant for any special town meeting to be posted 7 days prior to the special town meeting? I guess my suggestion would be let's follow let's follow the wording of an annual town meeting posting. That seems to make sense to me.
No, Mass
No.
General Law says a special town meeting has to be posted 14 days in advance.
Okay. There we go.
Town meeting just 7 and special town meeting 14. We ought to put that in.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's by state law,
Okay.
just so you know.
Okay. Well, I was just, my question wasn't about the state law. It was just about saying something if it's required.
Put it in.
So if
So
we
the-
should, another sentence about 14 days.
So the STM, Chris, is 14 days and the ATM is 7?
Yes.
I don't have a problem adding the 14-day wording to this. Anybody else?
Nope.
All right. Okay, moving on. Item 5 was related to, should we add wording to allow the moderator, hold on, I'm sorry. Should we add wording to let the moderator, vote? My knee-jerk reaction is that the moderator can probably do whatever the moderator wants to do because it's an incredibly powerful position. I don't necessarily know that it's not a bad idea to add it too. Whatever the group wants to do.
That was also correct. I was kind of wondering about whether or not that first sentence says voting shall be by show of hands. Whether that in fact then restricts the town moderator from doing that. Town moderator.
Hey, Chris, can you mute your computer, Chris?
What was that?
Can you do me a favor and just mute unless you're talking, because for some reason there's a lot of feedback coming through there. Thank you. Sorry, John. Go ahead.
The first wording in the bylaw says voting shall be by a show of hands. And that seems to preclude allowing the moderator to introduce electronic voting, even as an experiment. So if there were a way to just change the wording with to include by a show of hands or by appropriate electronic means, would allow the moderator to move us ahead on some of these issues.
And you can still put that second part in.
I have no problem adding, wording to include electronic voting. I think it just makes sense. It's going to happen at some point.
It's gonna happen.
Rest of the group good with that? Yep. All right.
I'll
Add
just
it.
check there's nothing online, now, so.
No, I think it doesn't hurt to add it. It's probably an authority that position already has, but if we're going to say by show of hands, why create an issue with electronic voting if we can just add it?
Okay.
The authority or needs it, and if she needs it, she'll have it through the bylaw. So.
Just one item, Al, I think that you should inform the moderator of this proposed change.
Okay. I can do that. If, again, I'm trying to consolidate this so we don't have to have meetings over meetings. If the moderator is okay with that change, group okay with me changing the wording on that?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. We'll always have the opportunity to come back to the group, after the public hearing as well and change anything we want. I'm just trying to streamline this as much as possible. So item number 6, suits and actions. This was some questions that John had put forward. We actually put a lot of conversation into these areas, John. Make a long story short, all employees basically are covered by the town. Many of them are covered by the Mass General laws. And yeah, the select board does have the authority to determine what suits go forward and what actions go forward. And in terms of the special town council and the town council, we had significant conversation about why the town administrator should have the authority to do whatever he has in regards to the town council and the select board in terms of special town council. Ad nauseum about it. So I don't know if you have any.
No, I mean, that's what I would expect. And it's the only reasonable way to do things. It's just that for example, there's the wording that says there's an exception for the town collector. But then I looked in the town collector bylaws and I can't figure out what that refers to. I don't know what it is that the town collector can do that overrides or takes the place of what the select board can do. I don't know why that wording is in there. And similarly on the for the treasurer, there's specific wording on the treasurer. The only wording I could find on the treasurer was that allows the treasurer to select the financial advisor, bond counsel, and textile attorney. That selection, if by selection you mean appointment, then that would be an exception to what the powers of the select board are. But if it doesn't mean that, then there's no reason for putting in an exception here. I mean, it doesn't seem to me, unless select means a whole lot more than just select, it doesn't seem to me that the bylaws give the town treasurer much more authority in legal matters. Steve, do you?
Well, I can speak, well, obviously for the position of the treasurer and in part to the collector, that state law puts on those offices specific duties, and using mine as an example for tax title. So using tax title to hire an attorney to represent the town against the delinquent taxpayers is usually outside the scope and realm of the Board of Selectmen, number one, but also it requires that the treasurer actually file suit in land court on behalf of the town to foreclose on property. So it's out of the purview in chapter 41, I think it is, that gives the authority to the treasurer, and in some cases, likewise for the collector.
Good. So then my question is that does it make any difference as to whether or not what we say about the treasurer is there, if it's covered by Mass General Law? And if it does make a difference, then shouldn't the wording be a little more precise than the wording that's in there? Shouldn't the wording reflect more of what's in Mass General Law?
Well, let me put it this way. The original scope of the town treasurer and the original bylaws that we're replacing, I think, was one sentence long. And I was asked by the committee to outline the duties and responsibilities of the treasurer. And so that's what I did.
You know, and I think it outside of this issue, having those responsibilities kind of listed there is actually really important moving forward. If we're going to have a recall not that anybody's going to recall Steve, you do way too good a job for that. However, if somebody wanted to recall the town treasurer, certainly if you never showed up for work, or if you didn't, I don't know, there's probably some other things, but having some sort of list of responsibilities and standards that you're held to, if you're not taking care of those, then that would be, ground recall. So I think it was really important now in hindsight. I don't necessarily know that we did it for that purpose, or maybe we're smarter than we actually think we are, and did something good. But I think there's going to be a residual kind of benefit to that. So I guess the question is, do we need to make a change to the group, or are we good with the way it is?
I don't think we need any changes. And more to the point is that you may recall the town clerk asked to do a similar thing, to expand basically her job description in the bylaws. And I think it's a good thing. It outlines what we're supposed to be doing. And you're right entirely that if we kept it at the one line, they could not recall me for anything, because I didn't do anything. I don't have to do anything.
Right, exactly. So I think that, that exists already with what we're trying to do. So
Does-
I'm with leaving it the way it is. What about the rest of the group? Any thoughts?
You know what my thought is about that one? How come we don't put, you know how sometimes we'll put Massachusetts general law, blah, 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 blah. How come in that, if it goes into more detail, that we don't put after 5, as per whatever it is?
I think we do. I think in the beginning, I don't have the proposed complete change.
Okay, I do. And
Doesn't it say
Beginning
duties,
of-
responsibilities according to Mass General Law, whatever it is?
okay, we're
First section, perhaps?
town treasurer, chapter 7.
Virginia, what are you looking up right now?
Town treasurer, yeah,
Okay.
it does. In accordance with Massachusetts general law, it just doesn't have which one it is.
Okay.
You know,
So to the bylaw committee, are we good with it the way it is?
Yes.
Does
All right.
selecting cover the authority?
Are you just referring to the,
Selecting a financial advisor, bond counsel, and tax title attorney.
I don't think there's any problem with the word. I mean, it's also based upon the Association for Treasurers and Collectors, which also outlines the duties and responsibilities. The language could have come straight from there. I just don't recall, John.
All right, so, okay, so moving forward. Again, item 7 kind of goes along with what we just talked about. We've been through the whole town council over and over, and unless the committee, wants to change something, John, if you want to speak to it, you can. I can tell you that we've been through it. And this kind of goes along with the what we just talked about as well, about the town attorney. Anything else you want to add to that, John?
The title, appoint town council, the bylaw doesn't talk about, the bylaw that you have written in there doesn't talk anything about town council, it talks about special town council.
What,
I just thought the title in the bylaw ought to match up.
Town council is appointed by the town administrator. The special town council, I don't know if it should be town council, special council, whatever, is just in case, let's say,
No, I know, it's the title. It's the title doesn't match up with what's said. This title of section 5 is authority to appoint town council. And then the bylaw reads about the appointing of special town council. And it would seem then to say that there's some authority for the select board to appoint town council, when in fact, that seems to be under the town administrators.
The simplest answer, the way to correct that would be inside the text of the section is to put the words to appoint town council and or special town council.
Steve, I'm actually, hold on a second.
Yep.
I'm looking at documents and I need to be looking at you guys. All right, so
to it though, Steve. Because there are two different things here. There's a town council and there's a special council. Town council is appointed by the town administrator. Special council can be appointed by the Board of Selectmen if it's required, because they cannot use town council or it has something to do with the town administrator. Because if you have a problem with the town administrator and they have to appoint council, you don't want to use the guy that the town administrator appointed. You want to use somebody else from the outside. So there's two separate things, town council and special council.
Right.
what
So-
chapter is this all under? What are we looking at?
go to it right now.
It's probably under the select board.
Section 5,
It's on page 6 of the bylaws, the chapter 2 on the select board.
Oh.
Again, I don't have any problem with what it says. I
Yeah, I
have
know you did.
what the title is of the section.
Authority to appoint.
Because
All I'm trying to do, John, is not confuse the issue between a special counsel and town council. That's all I'm trying to. One's appointed by one and one's appointed by the other.
So I think the simpler answer to John's point is then the select board, so the title, I see exactly what John's saying now. So Brian, and it actually goes along with exactly what you're saying. What John is saying is that just the title, forget about the wording of section 5.
no problem.
Should say, going along with what you're saying, Brian, the title should say the authority to appoint special town council. And that would go right along with what you're saying, Brian, as the select board has the authority to appoint special town council in the situations that you mentioned. And it still doesn't take away the town administrator's authority to, so when I read it, John, initially, I didn't understand it. Now I understand it completely.
So put the word special in the title.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's,
And then what the bylaws will say is that the town administrator can appoint, or has the authority to appoint the town council, also has the authority to appoint special town councils. And in addition to that, the select board can appoint a special town council.
that's right. And now that I don't know why I had a mental block on it before, it makes complete sense. And it goes right with what we intended to do anyway, so. Okay.
Has this been run through the legal process by us? In other words, I wonder whether or not the town administrator can be given the authority to appoint the town council.
What was the first part of your question, Bob?
Has anybody reviewed this change? In other words, town council or the attorney general's office?
Both have.
And they had no problem with the town administrator appointing town council?
We've not heard anything back from town council, but the attorney general's office has seen these. Now, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, I don't recall if we've made any changes to these since we sent them to the attorney general's office. It's entirely possible, but the best answer that I can give you, the most honest answer, is yes, they've been looked at by the attorney general's office already. I don't recall if we made any changes to this area before or after that.
The reason I ask, I looked at the Mass Selectmen's Handbook, and it speaks about appointing a town council, and it says most typically it's done by the Board of Selectmen or town manager, but it does not say town administrator. And then it goes on to say where it is done by a single individual, it typically would have confirmation by the Board of Selectmen. So that's why I'm wondering, it's almost like a town manager is a different position than town administrator.
Well, I can tell, Chris or Brian, I think you might be best suited to answer these questions, certainly Virginia too, if you have anything. If I understand the process correctly, generally speaking, the town administrator would appoint the various officers, the chief of police, and then or the town attorney, and the select board affirms the town administrator's appointments. Chris, is that right?
Yep, that's the way we do it. Actually, under the selectmen rules and regs, they have up to 14 days to decide whether to approve or not approve.
And I believe that also that occurred when the town administrator's responsibilities changed at some point, right?
Yes.
What the form of that piece, that position?
That's correct.
All right.
Okay, I have,
What's that?
I have to go back to the section 5. I'm still not clear about how you want to change or what you're proposing for section 5, because to me, they're two separate things
What's section 5? Hold on.
that John's talking about.
The special counsel.
Appoint town council.
All right. So Virginia, under this, so section 5, the way that we have it, the way it's written right now in our proposal,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the title says to appoint town council. Our intention and the text wording of that section is related to special town council. So all we're doing is adding the word special to section 5's title, so it doesn't get confusing as to what we're talking about.
And so in addition to adding it in the title, you then have to also add it down below in the explanation of it.
It's already in there.
It's already,
Oh, it isn't, the way I'm looking at it.
Select board acting as town agents shall have the authority to appoint and employ special town council.
Oh, see, the one I'm looking at just says a town council.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're looking at an older version because we went back and forth on this about.
Okay, then fine,
Yeah,
makes sense then.
all right, I think we're good there, right? Item 8 is related to the town administrator's responsibilities and authority. And John's question was, is it legal for the town administrator to supervise elected officials outside the authority of the select board? He says, certainly some coordination is called for, perhaps a twofold approach. The first of which is changing this wording to something like, and he gives two paragraphs that the group has seen. Again, John, this is an issue that we went back and forth about. How do you force compliance?
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to do. You know, and I think I participated in a brief conversation about that with you, and you know, I don't have any problem with the idea at all. It's just I was wondering about the wording and thinking that perhaps the only way to make this happen is to have the responsibilities of the other positions be specified, that they have to do whatever it is as part of this coordination process as part of their duties. This is in addition to what's required by Mass General Law. Because without that, then you can say whatever you want about the town administrator having to do these things, but the town administrator will in fact have an impossibility on his or her hands if the other people don't want to do it. And they're not required by law to do it. So you really got to, if they're elected officials, I think you've really got to require them under your bylaws to do some of these things that you might want to happen for the coordination. And I know that it makes some things more difficult because then you got to specify. So I gave some ideas about the kinds of things that you might want to be able to specify. But other than that, it has to do with just the wording, not the intent. I'm entirely agree with the intent.
Yeah, I think that going back to what we had talked earlier about setting up the responsibilities as the criteria for recall makes sense. And I guess I'd really have to talk to, or we'd have to talk to Chris about how do we word that? How would we go back to just by way of example, the treasurer or whoever and say, okay, Chris, what is it that you would expect from them? Or what would you need from them to be, financially manage that piece of the puzzle? And if you held it under their responsibilities, I think that's something that, again, Al Wishart's the collector and doesn't do his job because I'm not giving Chris Martin the required things I'm supposed to require him. That's grounds for recall.
And that may work, but I'd be pretty certain that unless that's said, it can have no possibility of working. You couldn't use Steve's refusal to turn in certain kind of reports that Chris wanted as a means to recall him if it's not legal for him to supervise it without it being said in our bylaws that that's what the treasurer has to do in addition to the other duties.
Yeah, and I think that, we've done it as well, so I'm not putting this on you, but looking at it referring to it from the perspective of supervising, it's really not an accurate description of what we're hoping to do. What we're hoping to do is kind of enforce compliance with good budgeting practices.
Right.
And how they go about doing that, as long as it's done and made available to the people who need it, I think it's okay. Us from the group, especially Chris, who I think just checked out of the camera.
Just check it out. Speaking of checking out, Al, I do have to excuse myself. I have another commitment momentarily. So with your permission, sir, I need to leave.
No, I understand that. And if the other group members can hang on just for a few more minutes, we can try to get through the rest of it. All right. So what are your thoughts on this in terms of,
Okay, Al,
yes,
can you? All right, number one, the problem becomes is an elected official only reports to the electorate. That's the problem we run into, okay? That's the idea behind an elected position. Nobody can tell them what to do or not to do. So how can we turn around and say that they can become susceptible to a recall vote because they're not providing something that the town administrator needs? How can you turn around and make that be part of a possible recall if they only report to the electorate and not to anybody else in town?
I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, neither.
And that's exactly the point, that unless it's part of the job description and they're not doing part of their job description. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that you can, as long as you follow mass general laws and include what's said in there, you should be able to write the job description however you want. And the job description then is precisely what the bylaws will say, are the treasurer's duties and responsibilities.
It'd be up to town council to test it in court.
Huh?
I say it would be up to town council to test it in court. Can't do it unless you have it in the bylaws.
Right.
From your perspective, what if it should be changed in this regard?
Before I answer that, I'd rather just really take a good look at it, have a chance to think it through, be honest with you, Al. Okay? And then maybe talk to town council a little bit on my own.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to suggest this. Why don't we set this one area aside? We can always come back and address it again, either before a public hearing or even after. Again, it's still all going to have to be proposed before a town meeting after the public hearing anyway. We can set it aside as a to-do item. Chris will take care of having a conversation with the town attorney to see what, if anything, can be done along this line. It works for me. Why don't we do that? Because we really don't have the answer right now. So,
That's fine. Fine with me.
okay.
Virginia?
Al,
Yeah.
could you go back a bit? You were talking about the authority to appoint the special town council. There was a section that John had put down, which was the town administrator's responsibilities shall appoint the town accountant, highway superintendent, blah, 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 blah. Why isn't the COA director listed in there?
Well, he is or isn't, Bob?
Is not.
Bob, the COA director is a contract employee now. So
Yeah.
basically, when the selectmen sign their contract, that's when that's the official document appointing her.
How does that contract differ than, we'll say, the contract with the highway superintendent,
Or the police chief?
or the police
It's
chief, or the fire chief,
That's
or?
the idea. That's the same idea, Bob. Anybody who's a contract employee really doesn't need to be appointed because they're under contract. And the descriptions or the language in the contract that is signed and negotiated by the Board of Selectmen are the things that rule their employment. The town administrator doesn't have to appoint Dave DeRocher anymore because he's a contract employee. He doesn't have to appoint the assistant town administrator. She's a contract employee. Al Wishart, he's a contract employee. Lieutenant O'Grady, he's a contract employee. That's what you do with contracts, so you don't have to keep appointing them year in and year out.
Okay, but then why is part of your responsibility still listing appointing them?
Then change it. It's that simple. Take it out.
Okay,
Would it make more sense to just add the COA director position to the appointments?
Gonna be appointed sometime.
At least initially, right?
Yes.
The only time that a contract employee would be appointed would be during their probationary period. That's it. Outside of that, they enter into a contract and the contract rules.
So we either have to take out all the other appointment related responsibilities of this, of the town administrator, or add the council on aging to it. It seems to make more sense to me to add the council on aging director to it. Again, that way our bylaws, imitate our reality and how things actually work. Does that make sense? Anybody? Going once?
It does make sense.
All right. Done. Hold on, I'm lost. That was back to,
This doesn't preclude then somebody from saying we have contract employees. I hope. If there's no exception for, if the people named here are contract employees, does this say you're not supposed to have contract employees for these positions?
no. We're gonna add COA director to his responsibilities and move on. Make sense? Virginia, Brian?
Makes
Anybody else
sense.
want any? Anybody else want any? No.
Holly?
Bob, are you examining?
No, you're the contract employee, and you're the contract employee, so if it doesn't bother you that this doesn't preclude being on the contract, okay.
I don't think it does. I think that,
Because it would be easy enough to say, unless the positions are under contract. It would be easy enough to put that clause in there.
yeah, we can do that. Anybody have a problem with that? I don't. I think
No,
it's,
I think that's a good idea. Good
Yeah, but
idea.
wait, if you put that clause in, you already know which positions are under contract, so why are you still including those positions in there? I think it's easy just to put COA.
No, because as Brian has pointed out by Chris, that basically while they're on the probationary period, they're not under contract. And that you have to have a police chief appointed even as a probationary period. Somebody's got to do that.
that's not entirely accurate. If I can have a contract and have a probationary period in my contract, it doesn't mean I'm not a contract employee. Every police officer, myself included, had a 1-year probationary period in their, it's in the collective bargaining agreement. They're still contract employees. I'm a contract employee. How the town deals with me in the first year of my contract, if I agree to it, doesn't make me less of a contract employee. It might relieve some of their requirements of just cause getting rid of me, but it doesn't say that they don't have to pay me along the lines of the contract. Doesn't mean that they don't have to provide me the vacation, the sick time, and anything else that the contract requires. I'm still a contract employee, even if I'm on probation.
Right. This doesn't preclude that. What it says is that the town administrator, if the people on these positions need to be appointed, he gets to do the appointing. If they're under contract and they don't need to be appointed, then he doesn't get to do that. Doesn't have to do that. It comes in, I think, it comes in.
Chris's point is, yes, I have to be appointed day one. And that appointment basically comes from him and it's affirmed by the select board. After that, I have a contract that determines what the town of Granby has to do to get rid of me. For lack of a very simplistic way of saying it, but that's the reality of it. So everything from that point forward is guided by my contract. So I still get appointed every year by the select board, or that's not true. I get appointed every 2 years by the select board. But on the side of that, my contract is running as well. And certainly you don't have to appoint me, but you're going to pay me year 3.
Right, that's exactly what the position is here, that we're allowed to do that because you do not have to be appointed after you've been here. If the bylaw says that the town administrator shall appoint the police chief, then that, I think, would be something which would negate the possibility of having in a contract that you don't have to be appointed. Contracts can't go against the law. And if the law says you have to be appointed, then whatever else the contract says, you've got to be appointed. So whatever you try to have in your contract that says you don't have to be appointed in order to have a job, I'm not certain would hold if the law says something different.
I guess I'm getting confused because I don't see how, where anybody said anything about putting in the contract that they don't have to be appointed.
If we have a law that says position X is the law of Granby, and then someone wants to make a contract, and in their contract, there's something written there that nullifies position X, is that a legal contract?
No, a contract can't supersede state law.
Yeah, or town law, can it? Can it supersede town law?
Can a contract supersede town law? I would say no.
And that's what I would worry about, unless there's an exception made for people under contract. And I don't know what the initial process is, but it doesn't seem to me that you can have a contract without being an employee. So you've got to be appointed to get the contract.
I think we're
Al, you said that you were appointed every year, right?
every 2 years, yeah.
Every 2 years, okay, and you get a little piece of paper,
Yeah.
okay? Who signs on it?
I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't even look at them. The select board does. I
I can
believe
give you a couple of my own.
You keep him busy with all this other paperwork. He doesn't
I
have time.
think it's a select board. Pretty sure.
Select board. So then they're the ones that are appointing you at that point in time.
They're the
Unless they've
affirming
changed the
authority.
wording on it.
Yeah. I think that very simplistically, we can add COA to the list of responsibilities for the town administrator to appoint. That's where we got started along this. The issues about contract employees, I think, is really getting convoluted. The longstanding practice and issue of how this works, and I'm just not seeing the problem.
I'm fine with adding COA.
All right. All right, so let's see. Item 9. Only 10, so we're getting there.
10.
No, we're already on item 9. I'm sorry, we did item 9.
We did it, yeah.
All right. So the last item is item 10. And John had said, okay, well, actually, I'll read it. The town administrator's responsibilities and authority on page 10 make available the audit management letter from any and all audit reports, including recommendations. The town administrator shall report to the town all actions taken by responsible departments in response to the audit management letter recommendations. And his question, I lied, there's actually one more item, but his question was when and who. So who does he make it available to, and should there be a time frame? So is it suffice to say, make it publicly available to anybody who asks for it? I mean, it's a town document, right?
Correct. Once it's been presented to the board, it's town document.
Okay, and if the intention is then make it available to anybody who wants it on a request, then you probably don't have to say anything. I don't know what the intention is.
No, I got you. I think I'm okay with making that simple change.
Yeah.
Virginia?
Yeah,
No.
no,
Okay. Okay, I'm good with that.
It has to be made available to the board of selectmen first, though, before the town has a chance to peruse it.
Hey,
That
Al,
makes sense to me. Yeah,
Al,
yep.
why did you just say on acceptance by the Board of Selectmen, it's posted on the town's webpage?
I'm okay with that.
Good.
So after acceptance of
By the
BOS,
board.
town
It should
website.
be the town webpage.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. It's simple.
Could be some embarrassing things in there.
What was that?
There could be some embarrassing things in there.
Well,
But it's a public document, John. It doesn't matter at that point.
public.
Well, no, it's a public document and always has been a public document, but you have to ask questions about, the use of the public document. It makes the select board much more accountable for their actions, I would say, and anybody else involved, by requiring that every year it's going to be put up as a public document so that everybody can see it, whether they want to or not, as opposed to saying it's available. We think of this as a management matter, not a civic matter. And then you would have it available, but people wouldn't ask for it. So you would go ahead and be able to manage the situation how you felt. If you put it on the town website, then you're inviting all kinds of questions and issues and special town meetings, depending upon what might be in there. And every year you expect that it's just going to be some minor things that pop up. Everybody should know that there could be things.
Chris, I'm sorry. Could you mute Chris?
It's not, I'm getting there.
Thank you. We didn't hear anything you said, John. Sorry.
Wait, this is probably silly, but why is the word after acceptance by the Board of Selectmen? Can they refuse to take it?
So,
I think the point is that, it's a wordsmithing issue, but I think the point is before the select board have to start explaining themselves or explaining why it is, they at least have the opportunity to see it,
Yeah, I know. I get what the point is, but that bothers me, that word acceptance, because it makes you think
Where's the word acceptance? Where's the word acceptance?
we were saying what we could add to it.
Oh.
That's all. And that bothered me by putting after acceptance by the Board of Selectmen, it made available to the whatever.
I
Uh,
think Chris-
Virginia, can I answer that question?
Yeah, please.
The issue is every year, after the audit is done, the management letter is written by the auditor, independent auditor. We have a meeting between the auditor and the Board of Selectmen at one of their meetings. At that point, they have the opportunity to ask any and all questions regarding the financial statements, regarding the audit management letter, any recommendations that the auditor is doing.
Mhm.
Once that meeting is done, they accept what the auditor has said as fact. Am I right, Brian?
You're absolutely right, Chris.
So the board has an opportunity to review the management letter. If they have issues with it, or they think that the auditor is incorrect, they can refuse to accept that management letter as written and ask the auditor to either substantiate what he's written in there or to go back and change it.
Okay. Now it makes sense. Thank you.
If it's a request for substantiation and the auditor comes back with his or her substantiation, and then does the select board then, are they then required to accept it? Or can they say, we don't believe what you're giving as an argument?
They can still meet again with the auditor at that point and debate it with them and see what ends up happening. And we could probably at some point appeal it to the Department of Revenue at some point, because that audit report goes to the Department of Revenue also.
So there is a procedure to make sure you get a definite conclusion one way or the other.
Yes.
Good.
I'm okay with, I don't have a problem with it being posted on the website. I
I don't,
understand John's point of, there might be some things in there that are handled at the management level that maybe, we're putting our dirt in the street when we don't need to, but I guess to some extent, I'm okay with that. Chris doesn't seem to have an issue with it. Brian?
Al,
Yeah.
in this age of transparency, as everybody keeps saying, okay, we're being transparent. You air the good along with the bad and let the chips
agree.
fall where they may. And if a reporter calls and wants a comment, only certain people will answer a reporter's questions. That's how you deal with it. Okay? Just like any other report that goes out there, the minutes of a selectmen's meeting, they take them. Who knows what they do with that document? But you know something? If there's a question that arises, it has to be answered by someone who knows the answer to whatever question is being done. That's how you deal with how the stuff is being done out there.
I agree with that 100%, Chris. And I think that generally speaking, the transparency is an important thing, and rather get in front of it and have the opportunity to explain it if questioned on it as well. So I'm okay with Chris's suggestion of when it's finally accepted by the select board to put it on the website. Ryan, you guys good? Okay. All right. So the last budget item was related to the budget calendar, example on page 12. John just made a simple suggestion of, instead of it saying reviews and disapproves requests, would it make more sense to, and be better worded to say reviews and approves or disapproves requests? And that absolutely makes sense.
it looks nicer. Yes, it does.
Yes.
Might as well be negative all the way, John. Disapproves.
Yeah, but that isn't really what was meant the way it was written there. 'Cause
Right.
it was-
Right. But it certainly makes sense to address it.
Yeah, good
So,
catch.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So-
it was.
And
We have
there are
a
lots,
ton.
there are
What's
lots
that?
of other things in the documents, commas missing or periods missing and things. I assume that it'll be proofread sometime before.
I can tell you that it's been proofread like 14 times, and every time we find 5 more things. So it'll be gone through again. I can tell you, it's like anything else. You get too close to it, and you can't really see it. So, but let me find my agenda here. I got stuff all over the place.
Well, while you're looking for it, let me again express my congratulations to your group. I mean, this is incredible work that you've done. It really
A lot of
is.
stuff. Thank you. It's a lot of stuff, but
Is that you make us feel good, you and Bob, by taking the time to review this as
right.
minutely as you do.
No,
It
this
makes me
is
feel like
is-
all that work, it was appreciated and
Yeah.
looked at, which is fine.
no, it is great, and I really appreciate you taking all the time to do this. I know this was a long meeting, but I think it sets up well. So if the group is good with it, I can take and make all these suggestions, real, change them in the document. I'll forward them back to the group. While we've got everybody here, do we want to start talking about a date for the next public hearing? I would love to. Chris, if you're still available, can you have some input on like when you think we can do another public hearing? I would probably need at least a couple weeks to get, again.
How does October 5th sound? 5th or 6th?
Let's go with the 6th. Brian, Virginia, does that work for you guys?
First Tuesday of the month.
How about the 6th?
Works for
First
me.
Tuesday of the month.
I thought be down south.
Virginia's looking, she's not answering.
Well, I have a phone thing that I have to do at 4:30 on the 6th, but I'll be done, I hope so. That you usually do them at 5.
Oh, shit.
Well, do you want 5? Do you want 5:30?
5:30 would be better for me, but,
All right, let's do 5:30 on the 6th.
oh, wait.
Yes, I'm good.
Okay.
Delta just changed my flight time, so and I get it before. It's the 4th time they changed it so far in the last 30 days.
Jeez. All right, so let's go with that. So what I'll do in the meantime, I'll make these suggested changes. I'll get them out to the. Chris, if you could check with town council on that one item. Go back and see what exactly that was, but,
Whether the town administrator can require documents from an elected official.
okay, great. And then, we can get that answer. If you can get that answer and we can maybe, have another meeting quickly before the public hearing, we'll make whatever changes we need to make to that. If not, we'll leave it open at the public hearing and maybe we'll actually address it at the public hearing as a group. That way everybody will hear it during the public hearing. It won't necessitate another meeting. Go ahead, John.
Chris, is the question, if the town council says that, no, the town administrator can't do that, is then the follow-up question, can the town put into the job description, basically, or the bylaws for the other positions, things that they need to do?
We can ask that question.
That'd be
That-
great. Okay,
So Al,
Alright.
you said 5:30 on the 6th, right?
correct.
Is that okay?
So I'm gonna get all these changes back to I'm gonna get working on the public hearing, presentation. And I'll get that as well. And I think we'll just have to wait to hear back from Chris about what the, town council has to say. And then if we have to make any changes based on that, we will. And if that necessitates another meeting, so be it. If not, we'll go forward with the October 6th at 5:30 public hearing date. Make
Okay,
sense?
sounds-
All right.
Good.
John, Bob, thank you guys. Chris, thank you. Virginia, Brian, thank you
very
guys. We will adjourn at 4:06.
So moved.
All right, sounds good. Bye, guys. Have a good day.
Take care of
Thank
yourself.
Thank you.